Hi, this is Debonee Morgan, and you are with us on the Spirit of Now Zeitgeist podcast, where we talk to spiritual leaders and influencers and people who are making great things happen in the world of interfaith and interspiritual spirituality. And today we have with us Dr. Kimberley Hundley. And let me tell you a little bit about this amazing woman. She is a native of Los Angeles, California. She's lived in Atlanta for 30 years. And in 2018, she graduated from the Interdenominational Theological Center with her doctorate or Doctor of Ministry degree in pastoral professionalism and spiritual care. Before receiving her DMin, she completed 7 units of clinical pastoral education, that's the CPE, and she has worked in the field of social services for 30 years, serving the disadvantaged, disenfranchised, and marginalized people in the capacity of counseling and community ministry. Dr. Hundley has dedicated her career to advocacy and creating space for others to heal from trauma. And just last weekend, she became a certified spiritual director through the Zeitgeist program. And so, Kimberley, I'm so excited to have this conversation with you today to talk about your book, Time to Come Off the Porch, Journey of Healing from the Wounds of Kinship Care in the Black Family. So thank you so much for joining me, Kimberley, so that we can talk about this book. It's a wonderful read.
Thank you. Thank you. It's great to be here. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Yes, absolutely. So first, to tell us about the book, please tell us a little bit about yourself and how your story became so integral to what you share with us in the book.
My story, born in Los Angeles to two unwed parents. They were 17 years old at the time. So my mother raised me alongside her older sister, actually. So her older sister, which is my mama, and her husband, who's my daddy, he's now deceased, but they raised me from birth. And so raising me from birth, my mother, she would come by and visit. And as she got older and had 3 additional children, she didn't come as often or as frequently, and I wasn't as involved in her life as I was previously, which was okay because she would come by and visit time to time. But as I grew older, I would watch other families and I would see the moms and the dads and the siblings. And my situation was a little different and always felt a little different, though that I was loved, had 2 parents that loved me tremendously. But there was something always missing. And so I searched for that, looked for that. I would spend time with my friends in their homes at extended periods of time because I was looking for something, always searching for an answer. Why my life was a little different, where my siblings lived across town with my mother and her then boyfriend. And I was with my uncle and my aunt. And it was never a secret that I was not their biological child. But my mother, it was difficult for her, I think, to be able to integrate me into her present life. And at the same time, be as much as a parent to my younger siblings as she wanted to be. So I was left out. So I would want to come over on the weekends and spend time with my baby sister, my 2 brothers, but often because of her situation, her boyfriend was very jealous and didn't want me around because I was attached to another man from her past. So that was difficult for me to understand. As I got older, I kind of, of course, I had other friends. And so I kind of started doing my own thing. But growing up as a child, very difficult for me. So for me, I didn't want other children, other youth to go through what I went through, the struggling with the issues of abandonment, the attachment issues with me and my mom, the anger, the resentment, because there was a lot of unanswered questions. And I thought she held the key. So I struggled for a very long time with thinking that I wasn't enough and struggling with my own enoughness. I think it fueled my need to pursue the field of psychology.
Yeah.
I got my let me see. I received my bachelor's in psychology and from Los Angeles in Mount St. Mary's College. I ended up getting my master's in counseling psychology from Clark Atlanta University. And I worked in the field of the nonprofit world actually since I've started work. My first job was working on Skid Row with people that were detached from family and watching how their lives were out of control. So for me, that was like a wake-up call that, wow, though you were not with your biological mom or your biological dad, you didn't end up here. Right. So there was a saving grace. There was a buffer for me, I felt, that blocked that or prevented that. But I felt at that point in time in my life, I was 19 working on Skid Row, that I felt that it was my responsibility to help others not suffer what I went through or to get to a place where they don't know they're enough. So that is how this came along. And so every opportunity I had to write a paper or research document or my thesis or dissertation, it was always surrounded around the Black family, looking at family systems, looking at Murray Bowen and family systems theory and how all that played a big part of my life and how I was raised and where I ended up and where I am now.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and that, of course, segues into, so how did the book take form, right? Mm-hmm. You mentioned academic studies that were looking at this. So what's the story of how the book came to be?
Wow. The book came to be, I believe it was my master's in divinity program. I was talking to my professor and we were given the responsibility of creating a genealogy, our family tree. And so did my family tree. We started looking at some patterns on my family tree, some of the issues, some of the similarities, some of the strongholds, generational curses. So I talked to my professor about that, showed her my family tree, presented to her some questions I had. And so some of the questions I asked, she said, there's a term I want you to research. I'm like, okay, what's that? She said, it's a term called kinship care. And I'm like, okay, let me write that down, kinship care. She said, that is what is fueling the questions that you have. So I need you to research that. Hold on to this family tree. This is going to be really important for you. Hold on to this. Research that topic and use this for your dissertation. And I wasn't in a doctoral program at the time, but she said, no, this is going to be the fuel for that. I want you to hold on to it. Mm-hmm. And so Dr. Carolyn McQuarrie, and she was a professor at the Interdenominational Theological Center. So I'm like, okay, I'll study this. So I began purchasing books on kinship care. I started reading articles on what it was. And there was not a lot of conversation about the perspective of the child reared in kinship care. So that's kind of where my voice came from in this particular book. But I researched it, grabbed books, articles, all that stuff. And so I used the foundation of that to write my dissertation, which was probably 6 years later after I did the Master's in Divinity program. So I used the foundation of kinship care to develop my dissertation thesis, my dissertation. So basically my topic is, I was looking at how I was exploring the psychological issues that African-American women endure through the system of kinship care. Mm-hmm. So I interviewed African-American women. I did surveys, individual conversations, and it was so healing for me because I found a circle of individuals who experienced what I experienced. And we all had similar issues. We all had strained relationships with one or more of our biological parents. We suffered through abandonment issues, not feeling enough. And also we had broken intimate relationships consistently. Mm-hmm. And neither one of us have been or are in a healthy relationship.
Yeah, back to that initial attachment stuff, right?
Getting back to the attachment and codependency. And so it pushed me to move in that direction. So Dr. McQuarrie actually was my master's in divinity professor. She ended up being a part of my team for my doctorate as well. So she was the second reader for my dissertation. She was the co-facilitator for my cohort. And so she was able to be there with me when I defended my dissertation. So it was powerful. It was full circle. It was so healing. But that's how I got to my dissertation from all the work I've done. And even when I got my master's in Christian education from the ITC in 1998, I did the survey you see here is where that came from talking to my parents. I did an interview with them and all my siblings. I didn't include that in this book, but I included the conversations with all three of my parents, and I thought that was so relevant. And I did that conversation, oh my goodness, back in 97, and was able to incorporate it in this space. And it was, so telling of the healing that I needed, and listening all through those voices speak over me. It released me. So
that is one aspect of the book that I really enjoyed, was reading the actual interviews with your parents, your biological parents, and your mama and daddy. And we're coming from an academic dissertation. Another thing that I love about the book is it is eminently readable. It is, I can hear your voice in it, and I'm sure that would be true even if I hadn't met you beforehand. But it feels very educational, but more personal, both for getting to know you as a human, but also getting to know these systems through the lens of somebody who experienced this and it has helped form them, right? It was not dry. It was not removed. It was not academic. It was very compelling.
Thank you.
So I want to ask, I realized when we did your introduction that I was talking about your academic background, your scholarly background that qualifies you to write something like this, but forgot to mention, and I'm so happy that you brought it in, that you are also coming from a spiritual place.
Yes.
As a doctor of ministry and as a spiritual director, you're also coming from a therapeutic place as a qualified psychotherapeutic professional. But I want to ask you just for a moment, can you speak into the spiritual side of the work? Obviously, this is an academic thing that's coming from a very researched place. But what is the spiritual aspect of this for you?
I think for me, it was grappling with the ideal of theodicy and why do bad things happen to good people? What did I do as a child? What did I do to warrant my mother giving me up for adoption? And 3 days after I was born, what did I do to cause that kind of disruption in my world? So I struggle with that. I looked for answers for years. And so I always felt that I wasn't good enough. I wasn't enough. So for me, I built a relationship with God. I searched my life for meaning and for healing. And so I pursued my seminary training. I got my master's in counseling psychology, but I believed that I needed to incorporate my understanding of my relationship with my higher power to engage it with my field, the field of psychology, basically, in how I offered care. And I've been working in counseling for 30 years now. So I saw a need to engage the spirit self, because I believe that when there's disharmony in mind, body, and spirit, and one portion of us is wounded or not being fed, there's a decompensation, there's a breakdown. And so until we get all three of those things aligned, our mind, body, and spirit in alignment, there is this struggle, internal struggle. And so if my body is not well, my mind is not well, my spirit is thirsty, my spirit is hungry. So I think for me, it's better understanding how to feed my spirit, how to recognize when I am thirsty and where the well is and how I get there. I think for me, I didn't have a point of reference for that. I was raised in the Baptist church all my life. Went to the Church of God in Christ for 20 years after that. And I'm like, okay, I'm still not finding that space. I felt more liberty to praise and worship in the Church of God in Christ, but I'm still not getting a space where I can actively be me and I can actively pursue the tenets I thought were helpful for me, lighting candles, my incense, my Tibetan singing bowl, my meditation. All those things were ways that I can experience the deity, experience the spirit. And I thought that was so important for me to incorporate that in my book, incorporate that in my life and in my counseling sessions. And then also offering spiritual direction, I'm able to walk with others on their journey and finding themselves and finding peace.
Yeah. Yeah, that is so beautiful.
Thank you.
And as we were talking before we started recording, for me, the spiritual aspect of the book was just the humanity of it, the imperfection of humans, and yet the triumph of love. That there were great hardships for you as a youngster, and then there were also great blessings. That your story is so whole, and I find that those really drew me in. Right.
Oh, thank you.
So that being said, what was the hardest part of writing the book?
The hardest part was being transparent and putting everything out there, because I thought I needed to do that, because if I didn't do that, then what was I offering the community? What was I offering the reader? What was I offering those who needed to be healed, who needed to find a way to get themselves back to themselves by overcoming the obstacles of oppression and unresolved trauma they may have endured through the system of kinship care, through this, not even just kinship care, but brokenness, dysfunctional family systems that can lead to estrangement. I think it's the same it's like two sides of the same coin that we deal with that. So for me, I think the hardest part was transparency. The second thing is, wow, what is my family going to say when they read it?
Yeah.
So, and because I didn't dig deeply into them, but they thought I may have done that. So I've had all kinds of discussions and conversations until they've read it. They all bought it and read it. And they're like, okay, I hear you. Yeah. It's about healing. And and few of them said, I'm glad you did it, because we didn't realize what we were involved in. We didn't realize, oh my goodness, we didn't realize all these implications and the needs. And we didn't realize how prevalent it was in the African-American community. Yeah. And so also it's going on now in the Latino population at a high rate because of the stance we took on immigration, and then having our young Latino brothers and sisters incarcerated in makeshift, what do you want to call it? I'll call it a concentration space, but we have other words for it. But they now are trying to find family, be reunited with family, find their way back to themselves. And a lot of them are still placed in those spaces. So we have a lot of communities that are struggling with attachment issues, struggling with finding voice, finding their way back to themselves, and also connecting with family. And I love it because I can offer the term fictive kin to individuals who are struggling with finding their way back to themselves and also connecting to a family system, because not all the time can we connect or reconnect with biological family. But in fictive kin, these are individuals that we're connected to by blood, not by blood, I'm sorry, not by blood, but by love and by heart.
Yeah.
And those individuals can foster for us the most healthiest relationships that we've ever seen if we give it a chance and if we permit ourselves to walk in those spaces.
Right. Right. And, we were talking about communities of color. We were talking about immigrant communities, and the idea of fictive kin is very important in the queer community as well. And as our country continues to pass laws that are harmful to young queer people, I think the idea of finding those people who are truly family because of the bond here, but they might not be bonds of blood is so important. I love that that part of your book as well. So, Dr. Kimberley, what would you like your Black readers to take away from your book? What would you be happy if they tucked away in their heart and carried with them?
Wow, that we have history. We do have, I think the issue, a lot of people don't think that African Americans, we have culture, or we have a shared culture, or we have our own. I think some people have a notion that we don't have a connectedness, or we don't have, what's the word I want to use? Legacy, but we do. And and kinship care has been something we practiced even before we got to this continent. Loving each other, having a family that you have families that come together and love on one another. You may have more than one wife present, but they all take care of the children, and equally so. They all have different roles they play, but the role is to love the children and to ensure the children are cared for and loved. So we have that, and we've always had that. And so I think to bring it out in this book and talk about the fact that the kinship care is something that has been innate in the African American community, even going back to enslavement, because when we were separated, even on plantations, somebody had to care for the child left behind. Right. So mom had to remind, baby, that's Auntie so-and-so over there. That's Uncle Bob over there. So just in case I'm not here tomorrow, you have someone who's going to step in, and you have someone you can lean on and depend on to love and care for you. And I think that's something that we've always seen in the African American Black community, that we have those relationships. We always had neighbors that would step in and be our parents when our parents weren't home, and would report things to our parents. You know what? I saw her do this and that. So we would get it from them, and we get it from our parents too. Yeah. So we've always had that network of love, of kinship in the Black community. But I think that sometimes in African American community, we wait for someone else to identify or to affirm us. And I think the takeaway is that we can affirm ourselves, and we can love on ourselves, and we can be family the way we say we want to be family. And it's okay. It's okay. It's not the norm, the westernized idea of what family looks like. It's okay, because it's still family and it's still important. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, who's to say that the westernized way has ultimately had good results? So what would you want your non-Black readers to take away from it? What is the importance there for people of other cultures or experiences?
Wow. That families, no matter who we are, no culture, no whatever class, whatever ethnicity, we all go through struggles. We all have spaces where we have dysfunction that may be there. So it's a human struggle. I may have called it, talk about the journey of healing the wounds to the kinship care from the Black family, but I had to write it from my lens. And so that's why I've had to title that. But it's any one of our lenses that we can tell the same exact story of dysfunction, of abandonment, of attachment issues, and restoration, and the need for healing and reconnection. So I think it's a human story. It's a human need. It's a human journey to find our way back to ourselves, and to find inner peace, and to realize you are enough, and to be able to find your peace and to find happiness in your life, and no longer continue to be attached to dysfunctional family systems that don't care for you and don't love on you, but you strive and run behind it, trying to be affirmed, and you continually are beat down or mistreated or discarded. So it's to find your value and to stand on that.
I love that. I love that. I wanted to close with the paragraph that you actually closed before the references, et cetera, at the end of the book. And I just love what you had to say here. So I wanted to share it with folks, first of all, for the idea itself, but also for an example of this is Dr. Kimberley's wonderful writing. Healing is not a destination to reach. Instead, healing is a cycle of revelations where evidence of lessons and growing edges are revealed during moments of clarity. If no one else has made you their priority, don't you think it's time that you finally did? I promise, once you decide you are valuable and seek your peace, there is nothing in this life that you cannot conquer. You are worth the work. Your wait is over. It is time to come off the porch. Your life is waiting.
Amen. Amen.
Yeah. So here's what the book looks like, and you can get it anywhere where you get your books. And I just really encourage anyone to take a look at it. It's a beautiful story with some good lessons to learn.
Thank you.
Anything else you would want to add?
No, it was a wonderful conversation. I thank you for it. And I just pray that those who do get a chance to read it, that you find peace and healing. And there is a second part. I'm going to be writing the second portion of it this year, actually. And so there's a lot of questions. And so actually, because I did this, it opened the door to conversations within my family system. And I ended up doing the Ancestry.com a DNA. And I found out that my biological father is not who I thought it was. And I say that because, and it's so wild because
that's for a cliffhanger,
And this is my biological father on the wall behind me, and my two sisters I found after doing my book. His name is Eddie Metter, and my sister Felicia in the middle, and my sister Africa. You can barely see her; she's on the end.
Oh my God!
And obedience. So if I had not written the book, I would not have had the conversations that led me to even go and do genealogy. There was no reason to do DNA. I knew my biological father's name since I was a baby. And so I didn't have to search for that. I was just doing it because I did a presentation on kinship care, and I talked about doing your family tree. And one of my students said, I did mine, and I went on there and I found some siblings I never knew I had. Dr. Kim, you need to do it too. I'm like, sure. And I did. And I was amazed that happened, that I found my father. And so it's a whole conversation. So book two.
We'll come back with
my gosh.
book. Well,
yes.
Thanks again for joining us today, Dr. Kim, and we will look forward to the next book and the next opportunity to hear some more from you.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you, Debonee.